bring yourself back online. So we've looked at the humans, we've looked at the hosts, and I think today we're due a look at the third part of the tapestry of Westworld, and that's the music. I mentioned before, that the original pieces are amazing, but also the covers. They're well chosen for the most part, and they do add to the narrative, I think, for the most part. And I think the best way to look at this is possibly in episode order, and then we'll sort of look overall, I think, at the end, for any repeated pieces. So of course in the original, the pilot, we have an amazing orchestral version with a wonderful sort of flair to it of Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. Now this is one that I don't think is there to add any narrative flow, it's not there to tell the story. Like any opening episode I think of a series, it's there to world build as much as anything else. We are primed to expect covers of songs that we know as us, and that the guests would theoretically know, given that this is in our future in theory. It's not there to tell the story, it's there to say, this is what you can expect. And, again, it's an amazing piece, and I think it was a great introduction to the idea, because it's something that everyone knows. We all have grown up knowing it, I'm sure, in some form, whether it's from its original, sort of creation, if we're old enough, or, whether we've seen it in Vietnam films, or with live bands covering it like I've done in the past. It's a great piece, and I think it worked really well. So then we came to the next episode with music, being Chestnut, and that really picked up the thread of, okay, here's a song that you'll know, done in a different way, but this is where we're bringing the idea of a narrative tell into it. And I think this one was a little less kind of impactful. It wasn't like a big dramatic thing that if you understand the song you suddenly get a new revelation of the scene, and I think for the most part they are like that. It's more just enhancement rather than telling us something we didn't know. And I think No Surprises by Radiohead was a great idea, because at this point in time, again, we've got the vague idea that Peter's kind of stirring and Dolores is probably getting the start of that, but Maeve's pretty much untouched. So we are sort of slowly learning that this world is full of a lack of surprises. It's very much on the nose if you want to read it just as it is, but it is, I think, in other ways, and again, this is all my interpretation, I think it's very much a calm before the storm. This is the lull. This is where everything's nice, the loops are fine, the narrative's fine, the hosts are fine, the humans are fine, the guests, the staff, everything's fine. Apart from the occasional breakdown, it's all fine. It's the calm before the storm now, and we will see down the line something shaking that up. I think that's really what this song is meant to tell us. And like I've said, the thing that shakes everything up is the hosts slowly, or some of the hosts anyway, particularly the older ones, strangely, becoming more self-aware, becoming alive for all intents and purposes. We see it with Peter, like I say, and Dolores, and eventually Maeve starts to really sort of take it to a very scary level, but I'll get on to how good that is in a future video. We'll put a pin in that one, shelve it for now. So I think the choice in Dissonance Theory of music being The Cure's A Forest was great on two levels, and a few of them do have this. They have a multi-level approach. You can just take it as, oh, it's the title, A Forest, it's the forest of her mind because she's getting lost in it, things are coming back to her, it's like a wilderness in there, and she's got to find a way out. But if you know the lyrics, and I actually looked them up specifically because I've never really looked at them prior, it is very much about an illusion, particularly centred around a woman. And I think it's a perfect counterpoint, or perfect enhancement really of what we're seeing with Maeve. Her illusion is shattering, and I just love the fact that this was such a well-matched piece. Now, like I've said before, not all of them are there to necessarily enhance the scene or even the whole episode in a drastic way, and I think Contrapasso is one of those. And it's not a bad thing, because I love Nine Inch Nails, well, most of their back catalogue to be honest, and especially Something I Can Never Have. And this version was so moving, it was so stirring, weirdly counterbalancing the visual side. Obviously, I'm sure you can all understand why I can't show that here on YouTube, but it's such a wonderful counterpoint to it, although the song itself does have an element of sensuality, so it's not completely opposite, but I think the arrangement was a lot more emotional rather than physical, and it was a wonderful, as I say, counterbalance to what we were seeing. But there is an element, I think, of something that the hosts can never have. They can never have a life that can be lived in this way. They can't just go out and do debauched acts as much as they want, because unless that's what their narrative says, it's not something they're going to do. I mean, obviously, yes, they can get taken along by hosts, which is why, Dolores is there, but by guests, should I say. But, that's the only reason that they could do it if it's not part of their programming. But I love that piece. It's such an amazing arrangement, and I would love to hear a version with Trent's vocals on it, so if you know of one that exists somehow, or you can make it happen, please let me know. So after Contrapasso, we of course had the Adversary, or the Adversary, however you prefer to say it. And as a Radiohead fan, this was great. 2 songs in 1 episode, and it's a Maeve-centric episode too. That's a win to me. So, the first of the Radiohead songs, Fake Plastic Trees, I think a lot of people have taken too literally. I think they've used that as a bit of a sticking point of maybe not the best song, because it's too on the nose or whatever. And yes, okay, it is on the nose. What is a fake plastic tree? It's a replica or simulation of something real and organic. What are the hosts? They're a replica or simulation of something organic, i.e. us. So I see it and I think it's valid, but it can be also valid as my next point. I think if we look deeper into the song meaning, we can see that there's actually a little bit better of an analogy to draw. I interpret the song, and this is entirely my interpretation, you might see it differently, but the way I look at it, and I think maybe this is how they saw it and why it was included, is yes, it's about living with, fake versions of things. It's about living with, things that you can just surgically enhance as you wish. But it's not as good as the real thing. It wears him, her, and Tom himself out, as he keeps saying in the song. It's exhausting having to live with this falseness, this fake life that you're making, because it's not as good as the real thing. It's tiring, and it gets you to the end of your tether. And I think that's a really good analogy. I think that's a perfect analogy to the park. If you spend too much time in it, you will feel empty and hollow. Just like I think the song is saying. It's all well and good having these simulations, but you've got to remember that the real thing's so much better. But of course that does lead into the second Radiohead song of this episode, and indeed the second song full stop, Motion Picture Soundtrack. Again, a song I absolutely love, and the arrangement of it was beautiful. And again matched with, sort of Maeve walking through, seeing these rather horrific sights if you think about it. But the song's very much an interpretation of, the feeling of being lied to all your life. It's not like the movies, they fed us on little white lies. You've been told, you've been sold an illusion, like Westworld, all of your life. And now you're seeing, actually, that that's not the truth. Maeve is seeing the lie she's been told, that she is just some poor woman who, is a madam at a saloon. That's not true. That's not her. That's not any of them. None of them are that truthfully. They are simply fake plastic trees in this world. And I just think the two together work so well as a bookend to each other. One's the fake life and one's them realising it. I think there's a lot more to it than just going, oh, fake plastic trees, it's on the nose. And this is a thread that's picked up weirdly actually in Trace Decay, as much like the bookending or the two songs being counterpoints to each other. Because at first we have House of the Rising Sun, which was actually originally known as Rising Sun Blues, and was a lot more in keeping with characters like Maeve and Clementine. Yeah, it was very much about, women being basically led into lives of disrepute. And it's very fitting with the saloon environment, of course. We probably all know the more famous version, which is about, sort of losing yourself to gambling. But that wasn't at all the original meaning of it. It was much darker. And I can understand how that wouldn't have flown in the 60s on radio. But of course, like I say, there's a bookend with Back to Black by Amy Winehouse. And that's very much about someone going back to things that are harmful to them or less ideal for them. And in a way, Maeve has to do that. She has to go back to the thing that she knows is not real, she knows is bad for her, she knows isn't truth, but she has to go back to it to develop. And I think it's an interesting counterpoint. You know, there's a song about a woman being led into that life that she's living, and then she's kind of choosing to go back, and that's what Back to Black's, you know, it is about. It's about the, why are you going back to that? Why would you return to a horrible thing? I mean, obviously it can be interpreted as well with Amy Winehouse's addictions, that it could be interpreted that way as well. But again, that's going back to something harmful, so I think it's still as valid. So all of these songs, all of these episodes have been leading us to the Bicameral Mind, the finale. And it's a Radiohead song again, of course. It's exit music for a film. Again, it could be argued on the nose, well, it's the end, you know, so duh, exit music. But it is a song as much as anything about escape. We have Maeve's failed escape attempt in the end. You know, she chooses, or does she, to countermand her previous idea of leaving. We have the hosts escaping from slavery, thanks to Ford's gifting of the park to them. We have Ford's escape of this mortal coil, if you want to sort of look at it that way. And really his transition into being a narrative tool. Although I wouldn't call Sir Anthony Hopkins a tool. But you know, it's a wonderful way of saying, yeah, this is the end for now. Because the song itself has a darkness and a hope. And as, if you will, an encapsulation of the series as a whole, I think a darkness and a hope is a great simple phrase for it. There's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of evil that can be done by people like the Men in Black, by Ford himself, you know, by guests who have less strong morals than perhaps William. But there's hope in it. The fact that Ford gifts the park to them, the fact that they could theoretically override their programming, even if it's just the older models, it's a start. And I think that's a good way to end the series, you know, because the second series is going to have to deal with this. And I've said before, I can't wait for it. But that's not all we want to talk about with music. I think we need to go back a little and look overall. You know, I've said before, obviously, you know, the actual original score is amazing. You know, perfectly punctuates the scenes of Sweetwater music. Obviously, I really enjoy, as you can probably tell. But you know, the sort of emotional bits, the theme tune, everything. You know, it's all well crafted. But a couple of the sort of little points. We hear obviously a couple of Debussy tracks, particularly. You know, we have Clair de Lune. And strangely enough, I mean, that's interesting on its own because it's based off a poem that could be argued is quite similar to the hosts. But the more interesting one to me is the favourite song of Charlie, the song that also calms Maeve down. It's called Reverie. This is no coincidence, of course. I mean, it's a beautiful piece. It's Debussy, and you know, there's a lot of good music from his sort of era. And it's just a perfect way of, yeah, of course it's going to be Reverie. You know, what other song? If there was a piece of classical music out there, even if it wasn't Debussy, called Reverie, I'm sure they were going to use it, or they would have called the memory system something that fitted. But I just think that's a beautiful way of adding to it. But someone did point out on something I saw that was actually written after the kind of Wild West period, which brings me to another point that I've also seen, because people have said, well, you know, with the player piano, they're all like not contemporary for the time. But that's for the guests. That's not for the hosts. The hosts wouldn't know it. They're not going to go, oh, that's that piece. You know, so it's for the guests. It's for the humans that the music exists in the world, and the player piano, and you know, a piece that was written after the height of the West. So, like I say, the music, as well thought out as anything else. You know, everything in this series has been well constructed, well crafted, well thought out, and well executed. And really, you know, we've got one episode, if you will, of this to go. And I think in that we need to sort of encapsulate everything we haven't touched so far, and just a big praise for the intelligence. So we'll get to that next time. So until then, I wish you a deep and dreamless slumber.